My name is Grace. I am 33 years old and work as a financial advisor at an investment firm in Seattle. I have lived frugally my whole life, working nonstop with a single goal: to buy my first condominium in my own name. That morning, after a nearly 14-hour shift, I left the office and saw my younger sister, Madison, pull up in front of our parents' house. She stepped out of a bright red SUV, gleaming as if it had just rolled off a showroom floor, holding a latte and smiling as if she were shooting a commercial for the perfect life. Me. My phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. My savings account, $80,000 I had been building for 8 years, had been drained overnight. At first I thought it was a system error. But when I asked, Madison just shrugged. "I need a car for the wedding," she said. My parents, however, were colder. They said, "You're the older sister. You have to understand. Helping her this once won't hurt. She needs to be stable before getting married." And what about me? The condo I was supposed to sign for on Monday? The future I had saved every penny for? Do they care? Have you ever been betrayed by your own family like that simply because you were the one who held up everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story touches something deep inside you, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Because what happens next is really just beginning. I stood there on the cold street, staring at Madison's radiant face and felt everything freeze. It wasn't Seattle weather in January that did it. It was that painfully familiar feeling of being taken for granted. From a young age, I learned one thing. In this house, I carried the responsibilities. Madison carried the right to dream. When Dad lost his job when I was 16 and Mom sank into depression for almost a year, the household fell on my shoulders. I woke at 5 a.m. to make breakfast, rode my bike to work at the bakery near school, then headed to class. At night, I worked the closing shift at a bookstore until nearly midnight. I still had homework, college applications, and the SAT with watery eyes from lack of sleep. Madison? She was 12 then, concerned with ballet class, princess dresses, and meals already set on the table. I once wished I could be a child a little longer to let myself cry when tired. But in our home, I was an adult before my time. I had been invited to interview for a full scholarship at Columbia, an opportunity one believed could change my life. But the morning of the interview, Dad called me into his room, his face drawn. "Grace," he said in a heavy voice, "your mother and I can't cover the mortgage payment this month. We're at risk of foreclosure. Can you postpone your trip to New York?" I was silent for a few seconds. Bitterness rose in my throat, but I nodded. "All right. I'll cancel my flight." Relief was plain on his face. I remember thinking then very simply, if I don't do it, who will? That summer I worked extra jobs, collecting every dollar from 3 positions: babysitting, waiting tables at a cafe, and doing data entry at a law office. I paid the mortgage on time. But because of that, I missed the Columbia interview. Columbia sent a rejection letter because I didn't show up. I folded that letter, slipped it under my pillow, and went back to work as if nothing had happened. Throughout 4 years of college, I stayed in Washington and studied finance at a public university. I worked almost full-time. I was still the person my parents called first whenever a car broke down, a utility bill was missed, or Madison forgot to pay tuition. I used to believe that if I worked hard and sacrificed enough, my turn would come. But in this house, devotion was never seen as extraordinary, only as the expected thing I had to do. I still remember Madison's high school graduation. Mom had a pastel pink dress tailored for her and hired a professional photographer for an outdoor shoot. Dad stood up at the party and toasted, the sweetest daughter in the family. I, still wearing my server uniform because I had just finished a shift, stood at the back of the yard, took photos with my old phone, and forced a smile. By then I was 23 and working full-time at an insurance company. Most of my salary went home each month to help my parents pay Madison's student loan. Madison had chosen public relations but dropped out after 3 semesters because she lost interest. No one blamed her. "Madison needs time to find her passion," Mom would say. Me? I had no time to find a passion. I had time to juggle bills, untangle debts, and save every dollar toward my own home. I stubbornly believed that if I were good enough, people would notice. One day my parents would turn to me and say, "You've done too much, now it's your turn to rest." But that day never came. And that morning, standing in front of that bright red SUV, I understood more clearly than ever. To them, I wasn't loved in the way I needed. I was a mobile wallet with a soft heart. Madison stepped forward and ran her hand along the car, her voice casually chilling. I know you'll be mad, but this car is necessary. The wedding's in 2 months. I have to show up properly with the groom's family. I looked at my sister and couldn't find words. She was standing amid what I had spent 8 years saving for, and she said it as if it were natural. Where did you get the money? I asked, my voice hoarse. Mom and Dad told me to use the family emergency fund. They said you'd understand. I turned to my parents on the porch. Mom held a cup of tea, an apologetic look in her eyes but no real remorse. Dad avoided my gaze, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. You haven't signed the contract for the condo yet, Mom said. That money wasn't used. We just borrowed it temporarily. We'll pay it back when we're stable. That's my money. I tightened my grip, trying to stay calm. It's a personal account in my name. No one asked me. Grace, Dad interrupted, this is a family matter. Don't make a scene. I swallowed hard. To them, family meant I had to sacrifice without question. Respect, ownership, my future, those meant nothing. While they fumbled with explanations, my phone buzzed again, an alert from the bank. Warning, unusual activity detected. Linked credit accounts have exceeded their limit. I had never opened a linked credit account. And at that moment I started to realize, this was bigger than a car. I had never been allowed to choose any part of my life. Maybe finally it was my turn to choose. I barely remember how I drove home that afternoon. Everything felt like a dull, gnawing wound. No blood, but the pain went to the bone. When I walked into my tiny rented apartment, I threw my bag on a chair, opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. Each click felt heavy, like opening a door into a truth I hadn't dared face in front of my parents. The screen showed an empty balance. My savings account that had held more than $80,000 now had less than $200. A red notice blinked. Linked transaction to subsidiary account. Grace Family Emergency Fund. Joint ownership confirmed. I had never created such an account. I had never signed anything related to a family emergency fund. I clicked into the statement. Transactions flowed by. Transfers to a car dealership, deposits to a wedding venue, payment for a white leather sofa. Each line a cut. Those luxury items were pieces of the dream I had patiently built for nearly a decade. My hands shook as I called the support line. A calm female voice answered after a few rings. Thank you for calling Renshaw Bank. This is Natalie. How may I help you? I took a breath, steadied my voice. I want to verify recent transactions from my savings account. And who created the linkage to an account named Grace Family Emergency Fund? The representative asked a few security questions, then was silent for a moment while checking the system. I could hear the gentle tapping of keys over the line. Yes, Miss Price. That account was opened as a joint account, with electronic signature confirmation from 2 parties. You and Mr. Frank Price. I went numb. Frank Price is my father. But I did not sign any confirmation. There is an electronic signature on file dated November 15th of last year. I can email you an image of the confirmation. Please do. Seconds later an email arrived. I opened it. The PDF displayed a signature very similar to mine. But it wasn't mine. In the lower right corner it read, Electronic signature confirmation, device used, iPad, Frank's iPad. I froze. That iPad was the one I had left at my parents' house last Christmas after helping them set up their online banking apps. I never imagined they would use it for this. I called back. The voice at the other end was more cautious. Miss Price, if you suspect signature forgery or financial fraud, we can open an internal investigation. Yes. I want that started immediately. I sat motionless in the dim apartment, blue light washing my tired face. Anger simmered low and grief without a name sat beside it. They hadn't just taken my savings. They took the trust one had kept in silence for years. My phone rang. It was the real estate broker. Hello, Miss Grace. I'm so sorry to inform you. The seller on the Greenway Drive condo has decided not to hold the contract. Your deposit wasn't transferred on time from your account. They've moved on to another buyer. I couldn't respond. I managed, thank you, and hung up. They had no idea that behind that cancelled transaction was a woman who had spent nearly a third of her life building that dream, now seated in an empty room with a heart in pieces. I turned on the living room lamp. The yellow light stretched my shadow across the cold wooden floor. The room was already small. Now it felt like it constricted every breath. The painting I had planned to hang in my new home still lay in its unopened box. I touched the edge of the box and felt my chest tighten. More messages came from the bank. System detected a short-term credit line opened last December. Borrowers: Frank Price and Grace Price. Credit limit: $30,000. Secured by savings account 829. I picked up the phone and called Ethan, my best friend and a risk control analyst at another bank. Ethan, I need your help. This is serious. His voice on the line turned instantly grave. Tell me. I recounted what had happened succinctly, no emotion, no tears, as if reading someone else's incident report. Grace. Ethan was silent for a few seconds. Send me all your statements, system alerts, and that electronic signature image right now. I'll check the IP addresses, the devices, and access times. If it's forgery, this is a federal offense. Thanks. Don't just thank me. This is no longer a private family matter. I hung up, emailed him everything, and collapsed over the table. The numbness wasn't solely about the money. It was the realization that my parents had crossed a line I never imagined them capable of crossing. I had forgiven them before, for debts, for Madison, for small things they promised to repay. But this was not about borrowing or asking. This was deliberate. Organized. Deliberate intent with a target. And the victim was me. I opened Ethan's reply and read, "Don't do anything more until we verify everything. But prepare yourself. If they used your information to open credit, we'll have to escalate this." I sat up straight. My eyes were no longer clouded. I looked around the apartment, the place that had once been a temporary stop, now turned into my front line. There was no other choice. Either I stayed silent as I had for 20 years, or I stood up and protected myself. Not for the money. For the truth. For justice. For the fact that my worth no longer lay in how much I could sacrifice, but in my refusal to be exploited any longer. I returned to my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon, just as the sun broke through after 2 days of steady rain. The familiar road into the quiet neighborhood, the one that held so many childhood memories, suddenly felt cold and strange. The red SUV was still parked arrogantly at the curb like a brazen reminder of the betrayal. I stepped out of my car, clutching a stack of bank-printed files. Every transaction, every piece of evidence showing the manipulated accounts and the forged electronic signatures. Dad opened the door. He didn't smile or greet me. He just looked at me with a mixture of tension and defensiveness. "We're having dinner," he said, then turned and walked inside. I went straight to the living room, where Madison sat with her legs crossed, holding a glass of wine like she was at a cocktail party. My mother stood behind her, watching me warily. "I'm here to talk," I said, my voice calm but clear. Not to be interrupted, not to be cut off. And not to be told to not make a big deal. I have been silent long enough. Madison set her glass down and glared at me. Again. "Can you wait until after my engagement party? Are you trying to ruin everything?" I didn't look at her. I opened the folder on the table, pulled out 3 sheets of paper and set them neatly in front of my parents. "These are the bank reports," I said. "My personal savings account has been linked without authorization to an account named Grace Family Emergency Fund. Opened and confirmed with an electronic signature from my father's device." My father pushed back his chair and stood up. "That's a misunderstanding." I thought. "You thought I wouldn't find out? That I would go quiet and work twice as hard to make up for it like always?" I looked up, unblinking. "No. Not this time." Madison jumped in. "You're overreacting. I just needed a little help. That car is about appearances for the engagement. My fiancé's family has standards. They judge everything." I stared into her eyes. "You bought an SUV for nearly $100,000 paid for with my money. Money I saved for 8 years. You think help means that?" She flushed. "You can't do this. People will call you selfish, cruel. The whole engagement will be ruined if I don't keep that car." I slowly reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. "Then let me make one thing clear. I called the bank's customer service directly. Hello, this is Grace Price. I want to freeze all credit accounts, savings accounts, and any linked sub-accounts associated with my name. My father stepped closer, his voice sharp. Grace, what are you doing? You can't. Yes, I can, I said firmly, eyes glued to the screen. I also want to revoke any financial access for co-owners who do not have legally authorized authorization. And I request an investigation into the forged signature related to account number 829. The representative confirmed the request and began the freeze procedures. Madison sprang up, her lips trembling. You're crazy. You're going to ruin the whole family. Mom, tell her something. My mother, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. Can you just give the family a chance to explain? After all, what's done is done. I turned to her, my voice low. You want me to keep being the family's ATM, right? Like for the past 20 years. But I can't anymore. I sacrificed a scholarship. I postponed career opportunities to take care of this household. And now, when I'm about to touch the life I've worked so hard for, you take it from me for a wedding party? No one answered. Not a sound. Just the clock on the wall ticking loudly in the heavy silence. Grace, my father said softly, I didn't mean. Not meaning to isn't the point. You forged my signature. You transferred money without asking. You gave my sister the right to decide over my life. Madison started sobbing, covered her face, and ran upstairs. Her heels clicked on the stairs, each tap sounding like another beat of betrayal. I refolded my files and put them back in my bag. From today, any financial account in my name will have no connection to this family. Accounts are frozen. Access is revoked. And if any further unlawful transactions occur, I will seek legal action. My parents looked at me as if they didn't recognize their daughter. Perhaps they truly didn't. In their eyes, I had never had the right to be angry, to say no, to choose my own life. I turned and walked toward the door. The keys were cold in my hand. I glanced back once. My eyes no longer waited for anything. You will never be forgiven, Madison called from upstairs, voice choked and full of resentment. I didn't answer. I hadn't come to beg for forgiveness or plead for affection. I had come to take back what no one had the right to take. My car sat beside the gleaming red SUV. I looked at it for a long time before getting in. As I started the engine, I saw my mother at the window, clutching the curtain like someone trying to hold on to something already slipped away. I used to think forgiveness kept a family whole. Now I realize that staying silent for too long is what destroys it. And some boundaries, once crossed, cannot be crossed back. The morning after I froze all the accounts, I sat motionless in my small kitchen, a cold cup of coffee in my hands. Sunlight filtered through the window and fell on the table covered with sticky notes, printed statements, and a complaint form I was drafting. Exhaustion ran under my ribs, but I would not allow myself to rest. I texted Ethan the moment the clock struck 8 a.m. Can you come over tonight? I need you to examine every transaction from 2018 to now. The message was marked seen almost immediately. He replied simply, be there at 7 p.m. Bring your laptop. Ethan was the only person left in my life I trusted. We'd met in college, working part-time at a data center. He went on to work in IT security at a big bank while I moved into risk analysis on the finance side. At 7 p.m. the doorbell rang right on cue. I opened the door. Ethan stepped in with his familiar backpack and a jacket speckled with rain. You okay? He asked, studying me for a long beat. I nodded. Okay, within the limits of someone who just learned their entire family has been financially exploiting them for years. He said nothing, set his laptop on the table and booted it up. I handed him all the printed documents and the transaction files I had downloaded from the bank. I need you to check 3 things, I said, voice steady. First, every transfer from my savings to any accounts linked to Madison or my parents. Second, who logged into the online banking system using my old iPad. Third, any credit lines opened in my name. Ethan nodded and began working, eyes focused. The apartment felt heavy. The only sounds were the steady tap of keys and the soft hum of the fan. I went to the kitchen and poured 2 more coffees. When I returned, Ethan was staring at the screen, his face taut with concern. Grace, he said quietly. You should sit. I set my cup down, my heart picking up pace. What's wrong? He turned the screen toward me. A table of my savings account transactions over the past 5 years filled the monitor. See this column? He pointed at a string of transaction codes. They're all internal transfers. Not large, $50 to $300 each. But look at the volume. I held my breath and stared at the number at the bottom. Total amount withdrawn, $253,678. I went numb. My heart felt like it fell into a pit. Could it be a mistake? I asked, my voice almost a whisper. Ethan shook his head. I cross-checked with the bank systems. The transactions are technically valid, but the access is not authorized. The user logged in from an IP address at your parents' house, and the device used was the iPad you left there in 2019. I bowed my head and clenched my hands under the table. Shame, anger, and a bitter kind of disbelief washed over me. All those times I blamed myself for not saving faster, for why the balance never rose as expected. Turns out every dollar I put in was quietly siphoned out. Ethan continued flipping through the data. There's more, he said. Transfers went to an account called Jared Holdings LLC. Sounds corporate, but when I checked federal tax records, it's an LLC registered to your parents' home address. The listed owner, Frank Price. I could barely breathe. Dad set up a company and listed me as a shareholder? Not only that. Ethan turned another page. He used your old email as the primary contact and listed you as investor backing capital. Basically the principal investor. I gripped the edge of the chair. A new wave of dizziness hit. For years I had been unknowingly investing in a shell company in my father's name, one I never heard about. This is identity abuse, Ethan said slowly. And if that company is hiding income or laundering money, you could be implicated on paper because you're listed as an investor. The floor felt like it might tilt beneath me. Do you want to see more? He asked softly. I nodded. He opened another file, this one a list of credit accounts. A long table appeared showing 6 credit cards opened in my name. 3 of them were maxed out and delinquent. What are these cards? I asked. 3 issued by Freedom National, 2 from Union Trust, and 1 from a private finance company in Florida. Did you sign any of these applications? I shook my head. Absolutely not. Ethan typed rapidly. I checked the signatures on the applications. Every one was signed electronically from the same IP as that Jared Holdings account. They used an old scanned signature, probably from tax paperwork or a university file. I could not form words. For a moment I felt as if my life had been stripped away. The personal data I thought private turned into a public commodity to feed the needs of those I had trusted as family. Ethan closed his laptop and looked at me. Grace, I know you're strong. But this isn't family drama anymore. This is a legal matter. And if you don't act, they will keep doing it. I'll help you, but you have to decide. Do you want to handle this quietly, or do you want to take back control of your life? I looked at him. My eyes steadied. Clarity settled over me. There was no reason to hesitate. Where do we start? I asked. Ethan smiled, a sad smile but resolute. He pulled a small USB from his jacket pocket and set it on the table. Start here. I've saved everything you need. The next morning I drove to the office earlier than usual. My head was spinning from the hundreds of numbers and strings of data Ethan and I had combed through all night. I opened my computer, checked my credit history again, and then searched for Jared Holdings' address. Amid the tangled information, a new data point popped up and my heart skipped a beat. A mortgage record in Florida. Property name, Sandpiper Bay Villa address. Naples, Florida owners. Frank Price and June Price cosigner, Grace Price. I blinked repeatedly, a tingling ran down my spine. I had never heard of any house in Florida. I had never signed any commitment to co-sign on a property loan. I called the law firm listed on the record, Hartwell Pearson Tampa. The receptionist transferred me to the attorney who handled the real estate file, Mitchell Davis. Hello, Ms. Price, he said, his voice calm and professional. I remember your file. We completed the mortgage paperwork last August. Is there a problem? I tried to keep my voice steady. I didn't know I was listed as a co-signer on that property. I never signed any documents. Could you send me a copy of the signed contract, including my signature? Mitchell was silent for a few seconds, then said, I can email you a scanned copy right away. To be honest, the signature looks very similar to your tax documents. It was notarized at an office in Bellevue, Washington. My heart accelerated. I hung up and opened my email less than 5 minutes later. The PDF appeared. I zoomed in on the signature. The handwriting looked familiar. But it was too neat, too uniform, like a copy and paste from a template. And most importantly, I had never been to Bellevue to sign any mortgage paperwork. I zoomed in on the notary note. The notary was Maggie Caldwell, Bellevue Notary Office, signed on August 4th at 10:36 a.m. That morning I had been in a meeting with clients in New York. I had emails and a Zoom schedule to prove it. I called the notary office and explained the situation. After a few minutes of verification, the clerk told me that the person who signed as Grace Price that day arrived with Mr. Frank Price and presented photo ID. I closed my eyes and the chaotic pieces began to form a clearer picture. Someone had forged my identity. They must have used an old copy of my ID, perhaps a photocopy of my passport I once left in the document drawer at my parents' house. Enough for the notary to believe the person standing there was Grace Price. I printed the entire file and drove to see my personal attorney, Renee Abbott, who had helped me prepare the purchase agreement for the condo. She flipped through the pages, narrowing her eyes at the signature. This signature has been copied. It lacks the natural variation of an original, she said. Look closely, we can see it's a scanned image pasted into the document. I nodded, my throat tight. And that house, they're still living there? Renee checked the property records in Florida. Yes. The house is currently listed as jointly owned by Frank and June Price. But because you are listed as a cosigner, if they default, you are liable for the entire loan. I sank back in my chair and gripped the armrests. They had not only drained my savings, they had made me financially responsible for a property I had never visited, never been told about, and never agreed to co-sign. Renee looked at me seriously. Grace, I strongly advise you to begin the identity fraud reporting process. We need to open a formal investigation with law enforcement. Would you like me to help prepare the paperwork? I nodded, eyes fixed on my name on the mortgage document next to the names of the people who had called me our beloved daughter. That afternoon I filed a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, attaching copies of the forged signatures and the false notary information. When Ethan saw I was online, he texted, "You okay?" I replied, "Just found out they used my name to co-sign on a vacation house in Florida. Notarized, forged signature." Ethan called immediately, not even waiting for a reply. "I don't have words for how brazen this is, Grace. I suspect they plan to use your name for a long time. The small withdrawals over 5 years, the hidden credit accounts, and now a property in your name." I whispered, afraid to hear myself, "Do you think there could be more?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, then answered slowly, "If you want, I'll dig deeper into federal records. I'll check if there are other assets in your name, any loans, leases, or shell companies. Everything can be traced if they used your social security number or other ID." I agreed. Ethan had been the one person I trusted before everything collapsed. Now he was the anchor in the storm. That evening I sat alone in the kitchen, the warm yellow light reflecting off the table piled with papers. I looked at each document with my name on it, a name they had used as a tool to buy a house, open cards, create companies, and take out loans. I used to think I was the strong one, the one who kept the family afloat. Now I saw myself as the foundation they'd quietly trampled for years. I poured a glass of water, my hand trembling slightly. A single question surfaced clearly in my mind. If they were willing to do all of this, what limits would they stop at? That afternoon I entered the Fairmont Hotel downtown for Madison's engagement party. The lobby glowed with the golden light of crystal chandeliers. Tables were draped in white satin, roses lined the aisle, and a piano played softly in the corner. Everything was lavish, the precise style Madison preferred. Elegant, polished, and never stingy. I passed the reception row and recognized a few familiar faces from past family celebrations. Some gave a brief nod. Others looked awkwardly as if they didn't want to be drawn into something uncomfortable. I wore a modest dark blue dress, my hair pulled back, no heavy makeup, carrying only a small purse and a folder tucked inside. Madison posed by the red SUV in the center of the event. Apparently she had reserved a spot to show off her new asset right inside the venue. Cameras flashed constantly. My mother stood next to her, smiling and introducing the gift. This car is Madison's treat to herself after all the preparation for married life. I stood a few steps away, but no one seemed to notice me. Or if they did, they pretended not to. I watched Madison chat with her fiancé, Chase, a tall man with perfectly styled hair that looked like it belonged in a cosmetic ad. There was nothing wrong with him, except that he had stepped into a performance he didn't realize he was in. Madison began boasting to guests about the new Westlake apartment they'd rented, calling it a temporary place until they moved to the luxurious villa in Florida. I stood still and felt my throat tighten. That villa, they had bought it using my name. I walked toward the center of the event where my father was talking with a group of guests, including my cousin who had once refused me a small loan when I first started out. Everyone was well-dressed, champagne glasses in hand, eyes cast over a scene that looked like the perfect stage. I straightened up, pulled the folder from my bag and took out a printed bank statement, the mortgage contract, the credit application, and the spreadsheet Ethan had prepared. Each document bore my name, a forged signature, and the amounts taken. I clipped them neatly into a transparent folder. I walked onto the small stage where the MC was about to introduce Madison and Chase. I interrupted, my voice clear and carrying. Before anyone continues raising a glass, I have something to say. The room turned. My mother's expression froze. Madison's smile faltered but remained plastered on. Sorry to be abrupt, I said, but there's information I think people, especially the groom and his family, should know before going any further. I raised the folder. The car outside, the Westlake apartment, and the Florida villa the bride keeps talking about. All of it has been paid from my personal account. And not with my consent. A strange hush fell. The piano stopped. People began whispering. I didn't come here to ruin my sister's party, I said slowly. I came to restore my dignity, and to protect my legal rights before it's too late. Chase frowned. Grace, what does this mean? I stepped forward and handed him the bank statement. You can read it. These are unauthorized transactions from my account. There are forged signatures, logins from my parents' home IP address, and the device used was the old iPad I left there. The Florida villa? I'm listed as the loan guarantor with an electronic signature forged in Bellevue. Madison rushed down the steps, her face ashen. You're crazy. You want to humiliate me on my special day. No, I said, looking at her. You did that to yourself. She swayed, hand to her forehead, eyes darting. I feel faint. Then she collapsed to the floor amid screams and the sound of glass shattering. My mother ran over, shouting, "Call an ambulance." I stood still, eyes fixed on Madison's pale face. Cheekbones white, lashes still curled, no tears. A doctor among the guests came forward to check her. After a moment he said plainly, "There's nothing seriously wrong. It's likely stress. She's alert." All eyes turned back to me. My father approached, pulling me aside, his tone urgent. "What are you doing? This is a family celebration. Are you trying to ruin your own sister in front of everyone?" I looked at him. My voice was not loud, but those nearby could hear. No. I'm stopping a fraud from becoming a marriage built on lies. And I'm protecting myself from being thrown into jail for loans made in my name that I never agreed to. Chase flipped through the papers in his hands, his face changing color. He looked at Madison. "Explain. What is going on?" Madison glanced around, voice thin. I just borrowed. Grace would understand. She always takes care of the family." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Not anymore." I bowed my head slightly in the center of the hall. "I'm sorry if this makes anyone uncomfortable, but I cannot pretend any longer. You may continue the party if you wish. I'm leaving." I walked out of the hotel without looking back. No anger, no shaking. Only a strange relief, as if I had just taken off a rusty suit of armor I had worn for too long. Behind me, a family faced the truth. As for me, I had finally begun to step into the life that truly belonged to me. I returned to my apartment exhausted after the chaotic engagement party. The moment I stepped through the door, my phone started ringing non-stop. Ethan called, his voice urgent as if something serious had happened. "Grace, we need to meet right away. I found something, and this isn't just family financial abuse anymore." Just that one sentence made my chest feel heavy. I arranged to meet him at the small cafe near my place. When I arrived, Ethan was already seated in a corner, a laptop and a thick file in front of him. He pushed the computer toward me. Look at this. It's the Jared Holdings data we talked about. I dug deeper and found another company formed about 18 months ago. The screen displayed the name Suncrest Media LLC. Its registered address was still my parents' house. The listed representative, Madison Price. See. Ethan lowered his voice. On paper, Madison is the director. But when I checked the transactions, most of the money is coming from accounts linked to one of your father's partners, a real estate brokerage called Harborline Group. I furrowed my brow. Harborline Group. Dad mentioned them. An old friend, they often invest together on short-term projects. Ethan nodded. Right. But get this. Harborline is under investigation by the federal tax authorities for suspected money laundering. The transactions routed through Suncrest Media match amounts Harborline declared as advertising expenses. In reality, it's a cover to legitimize money flowing out of Jared Holdings and the credit lines opened in your name. My hand trembled around the hot coffee cup in front of me. You mean, they didn't just take my money? They built a network to launder it. Ethan looked me in the eye, steady and determined. Grace, I've checked thoroughly. This is no longer about family financial exploitation. This is an organized criminal scheme. And you, on paper, have been turned into a central link. I shook my head trying to absorb each word. But why me? Why not use someone else? He sighed. Because you're the most trustworthy profile in the eyes of the financial system. Your credit history is clean, your income steady, and your credit score high. They used your name as a shield. Any agency checking would find a perfect record. Who would suspect a serious, financially responsible woman who saves every dollar to be involved in a laundering ring? I clutched my head. My whole life I'd tried to prove my worth, only to have my family turn me into a shield for their crimes. There's more. Ethan opened another file. Suncrest Media signed a contract for $1.2 million for an online promotional project. But there was no real activity. Money went in then out, mostly to an account in the Cayman Islands. The person who approved the contract is listed as Grace Price, CFO. I jumped up, nearly tipping my chair. CFO? I never heard of this company. I never signed any contract. Ethan handed me a PDF. On the last page was my familiar signature. Copied, stretched unnaturally. Your father did this. I'm sure of it, Ethan said. He knows how to get a scanned signature and manipulate it. Madison is the named officer to legalize it. You're the person who's been turned into the paper CFO. I collapsed back into the chair, breathing hard. In my head flashed the image of Madison in her engagement dress, smiling as she showed off the apartment and the car. She wasn't just living off my money, she was actively participating in my parents' scheme. Grace, Ethan placed his hand on the table. I get that you're in shock. But we can't wait. If financial investigators find this first, you'll be the one called in because all the signatures, the transactions, and the reports bear your name. My throat tightened. So I look like a criminal to them. Not if you act. You discovered this and you're cooperating. But you must move now. I recommend preparing the files, contacting an attorney who specializes in financial crimes, and reporting directly to investigators. The longer you wait, the bigger the risk. I clenched my hands. Part of me wanted to collapse and give up. But another part, the part that learned how to get back up when my father lost his job at 16, urged me not to quit. All right, I said quietly. Where do we start? Ethan pulled a small silver USB from his pocket. Everything I backed up is here. Statements, contracts, IP logs, forged signature evidence. This is the only weapon that will protect you. I held the USB. It felt heavy in my palm. A small object, but it contained the distorted life they had turned into fraud. On my drive home, I passed my old neighborhood and the house where I grew up. The living room lights were on. I could see my father on the sofa, my mother moving about the kitchen, and Madison sprawled on the couch with her phone. The familiar scene looked peaceful. But in my eyes it was a staged performance built on my money and my name. I stopped across the street and sat there, a question rising in me with no answer. How long had they planned this? What had they discussed? What had they thought of me when they forged my name again and again? Did they feel any remorse? Or did they only see me as a clean legal wallet, a perfect front? The phone buzzed. Ethan had sent a message. Grace, don't fall apart. This is the moment you need to be the clearest. We'll go through it together to the end. I typed back. Thanks. I'll see a lawyer tomorrow. No turning back. I slipped the USB into my coat pocket and took a deep breath. The old house still glowed with light. But inside me, the last tether had begun to snap. I walked into the Financial Crimes Division downtown with the USB in my pocket. Each step down the long corridor felt twice as heavy as normal, but I didn't allow myself to falter. A brass plaque read Detective Miller, Financial Crimes Division. I inhaled and knocked lightly. Come in. A deep male voice called from inside. I pushed the door open and stepped into a well-lit room. The desk was piled with files and the monitor displayed complex cash flow charts. The man, about in his 40s with neatly cropped salt and pepper hair, looked up. Grace Price. Yes, sir. He nodded and gestured for me to sit. I received an email from Attorney Abbott regarding your desire to submit evidence of identity fraud. You brought the data. I placed the USB on the desk, my hands still trembling. It's all in there. Bank statements, mortgage contracts, credit paperwork, the forged signature. I also have printed copies if needed. Detective Miller plugged the USB into his machine and stared at the screen. He was silent for a long time, the noise of typing and rustling papers the only sounds in the room. Finally he looked up, his eyes sharp. Do you understand, Grace? This is not just family financial fraud. This appears to be a financial criminal network with indications of money laundering. And on paper, you are being portrayed as a central figure. My heart stung. I nodded slightly. I understand I need to cooperate. I can't stay silent. He nodded. Good. We'll open a formal investigation. But there's something else. He pushed a brown file toward me. While reviewing loans under your name, we found a student aid application for a medical school in California, submitted 2 years ago. Applicant, Grace Price. Major, medicine. I froze. I never applied to any medical school. I work in finance. That has to be forged. We thought the same, he said. But the file includes a copy of your ID and an electronic transcript. Everything matched. The tuition was more than $80,000, disbursed as a federal loan. It's now delinquent. I cupped my head. Oh my God. Detective Miller looked directly at me. We traced the loan recipient. The person who obtained it was Madison Price. The room felt like it closed in. I felt as if someone had struck me in the chest. Madison, my sister, had impersonated me to take out a huge loan, then vanished from the education system's radar, leaving the debt in my name. I don't even know what to say, I stammered. Everything they did, it feels like my life was stolen. Miller gave a small nod. You will not bear this alone. We have enough to bring charges against your family. Tomorrow the federal court will issue emergency subpoenas for Frank and June Price and Madison Price. I sat in stunned silence, feeling both relief and dread. Justice was finally beginning, but I knew they wouldn't accept it quietly. Sure enough, that evening my phone kept buzzing. A message from my mother. Grace, please don't make a big deal. We are family. Your sister is young, she made a mistake. Give her a chance. Then my father's message. You will ruin us. All these years you've been our pride. Don't make yourself into a traitor. And Madison in her familiar tone. You're just jealous, aren't you? If you loved me you wouldn't take me to court. I'll lose everything. Please, Grace. I sat in the living room with my phone glowing, alternating between pleas and threats. I set it down, picked up the file on the table and stared at the forged signatures. Those pleas no longer reached me. The phone buzzed again. It was Ethan. Grace, they will try to manipulate you to the last minute. Don't waver. Tomorrow in court, stand firm. All the evidence is with you. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. A fierce resolve rose within me. I had been silent for too long, letting them define me by endless sacrifice. Now I would let the truth be known. I opened my eyes and looked out at the city lights. Tomorrow everything would change. But at least this time I went into the fight with the truth in my hands and no fear. That morning the sky was heavy and gray, adding another layer of tension in my chest. I sat in Federal Courtroom 4, gripping my folder as if it were a life preserver. The wooden benches behind me were full, press, curious onlookers, and a few distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. Across from me, my parents sat with their defense attorney, dressed neatly and trying to look composed. Madison sat beside them, her makeup carefully done but her face still pale. Her eyes kept darting around for sympathy. The judge struck the gavel and his voice filled the room. The preliminary hearing in the matter concerning forgery, asset misappropriation, and money laundering involving defendants Frank Price, June Price, and Madison Price is now in session. My parents' lawyer stood and spoke evenly. Your Honor, my clients admit to some mismanagement of family finances, but their roles were peripheral. They signed documents without full comprehension. The primary instigator was Madison Price. My stomach lurched at the words. I knew how my parents tried to absolve themselves by pinning blame on the youngest. Madison turned eyes wide. Mom, Dad, how can you blame me for everything? She cried. My mother bowed her head, tears brimming. We had no choice. They will believe you if you say you wanted a better life. Madison's sobs echoed through the courtroom. A few people in the gallery shook their heads. The prosecutor rose, voice sharp. Your Honor, evidence shows not only Madison but Frank and June Price actively participated in forging documents and laundering money. We request to present video footage extracted from the surveillance system at the Hartwell Pierce Law Office in Bellevue, Washington. The lights in the room dimmed. The large screen at the front lit up. The image became clear. My father sitting across a desk holding a stack of papers. My mother stood beside him, whispering something before placing a sheet down. He signed with a digital pen, the signature forged to look like mine, while my mother nodded, glancing around as if afraid of being seen. The notary's voice played on the recording with the footage. Are you certain this is your daughter's signature? My mother replied, yes. She agreed, but she was busy and asked me to sign for her. That voice echoed through the silent courtroom. I clenched my hands until my nails nearly dug into my palms. The prosecutor shut off the video and turned to the judge. Your Honor, this is direct evidence showing that defendants Frank and June Price deliberately forged their daughter's signature to guarantee a mortgage loan. It can no longer be considered accidental. The judge leaned his hand against his forehead, his expression stern. Frank and June Price, do you deny that the people on the video are you? My father bowed his head, his voice hoarse. No, that's me. My mother broke down, gripping the arm of her chair. Please, Your Honor, let me explain. We only wanted to secure a start for our little girl. Grace is stronger, she can stand on her own. Those words cut like a knife. Their excuse had never changed. I was the one who could take it, while Madison always deserved priority. Madison screamed, tears streaming. You made me the scapegoat all these years. I was wrong, but I wasn't the only one. I didn't sign the forgeries. Those two did. The courtroom murmured. Flashbulbs popped as cameras captured the moment my family tore itself open in public. The prosecutor continued. Furthermore, our investigation found that Suncrest Media, registered to Madison, received funds from Harborline Group, an organization currently under federal investigation for money laundering, and who appears on the transactions as the chief financial officer. Grace Price, the victim of identity fraud. In other words, the three defendants conspired together in fraud, forgery, identity theft, and money laundering. The judge struck his gavel 3 times, his voice ringing throughout the room. Based on the video evidence, the documents, and the testimony, the court finds there is sufficient cause to charge Frank Price, June Price, and Madison Price with multiple offenses. They face significant prison terms. The charges include financial fraud, forgery, money laundering, and identity theft. Sentencing will be scheduled at the next hearing. I sat motionless, a flood of feelings rising inside me, pain, outrage, and a strange relief. Across from me, my mother bowed her head and wept. My father sat stunned, and Madison trembled as if she had lost all footing. In that instant I understood that things were broken beyond repair. But at least the truth had been brought into the light. The burden was no longer mine alone to carry. After the hearing, events moved faster than I had anticipated. My parents' assets and investments tied to Jared Holdings and Suncrest Media were seized to support the investigation. As part of the distribution process, the court ordered partial restitution to me. Enough perhaps to acknowledge that I was a victim rather than an accomplice, though not enough to erase all the hurt. I stepped out of the courthouse holding an envelope that confirmed I would be reimbursed nearly $300,000, covering the amounts withdrawn from my account and compensation for the theft of my identity. Relief washed over me. No longer did a dark cloud hover over my head. When I returned to the firm, colleagues regarded me differently. They had heard bits of my family story, but now they looked at me with respect. The head of human resources called me into a meeting with the executive team. "Grace," he said, "we have been watching how you handled this situation. Your transparency, courage, and determination are the qualities we need in a leader. The board has agreed to appoint you as Director of Risk Management." I froze, my hands trembling slightly. I had dreamed of advancing for years, but I never thought it would come out of such painful circumstances. I stood, looked at everyone in the room, and answered firmly, "I will not let you down." A week later, I signed the purchase agreement for a new condo in Capitol Hill. The unit had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, the lights shimmering on the water like a mirror. When I opened the front door and walked in, there was no fear of being robbed again. This truly was my home, under my name, purchased with clean money. Ethan was the first to visit. He brought a bottle of red wine and a bright smile. "I promised I'd be there when you moved into your new place, remember?" I laughed. The first real laugh in months felt deep in my chest. "Yeah, and you promised to bring the cheese." "Got it." He set the box on the table. That evening, Eliza, my close friend and colleague, came with flowers and a cake that read "New Beginnings." We set everything out on the new dining table, put on soft music, and toasted. Ethan looked around and nodded. "Grace, see? Family isn't just people with the same blood. Sometimes family is those who respect you, trust you, and treat you fairly." Eliza took my hand. "You proved you're more than a victim. You're a survivor." I looked at them, my eyes warming. "Thank you for not abandoning me. Without you, I might have fallen." We laughed together. The sound filled the new apartment. I felt freedom like air, no more chains. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone beside the big window. The city below glittered. Traffic moved in endless streaks of light. I placed my hand on the glass and whispered a promise to myself. Finally, this is my life, to write it as I choose. A small, genuine smile spread across my face. Not a forced one to hide the pain, but the real smile of someone who had stepped out of the shadows and found herself. Looking at the city lights, I asked myself, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Do you have the courage to walk away from toxic ties, or would you stay silent to preserve the word family? For me, the biggest lesson is this: blood ties don't automatically mean support. Respect, fairness, and genuine love are what make a home. You may not choose where you're born, but you can choose how to live and who you call family. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can follow more real-life stories and the lessons they bring. You never know, my next story might touch something in your heart.